Okay, so this is mostly for you guys at home in case you're not sure. So the questions for question 41, 43, 44, and 45 are wrong. I will put up the answers for the exercise so that you can mark them. But in the meanwhile, you need to redo those ones because the others are not perfect squares. You're never going to get an answer. So your aim is to do the prime factorization, which I've done here. The square root is one of every second one. So if I've got 2 of them there, I write down 1, 2. And then if I've got 3 of these, I put down 1, 3. And then for 2 of those, I put down 1, 2. And for these 2, I put down 1, 2. It's every second one. So that's 6 times 4, which is 24. So that's the square root of 576. Just like when you have the square root of 100, then that's going to be 5 times 2 times 5 times 2. And if you put down every second one, you end up with the correct square root, which is 10, right? What number times by itself? So if you have the factors of them, works the same way. So this is a law for algebra, but I want you to understand it before we get to algebra, because then when we do it for algebra, you'll know why it makes sense. The usual way to do this would be what? How would you start this question? You'd do the 4 plus 2, you'd work in the brackets, absolutely, right? Please, every time you can work in the brackets, you should. So any time that it doesn't say the distributive law, you immediately would work in the brackets, and without any doubt, that answer is 18, right? No doubt whatsoever. The distributive law is when we do this instead. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to say 3 times 4, and then I'm going to say 3 times 2. Okay? You don't have to write this middle step, but basically what I'm doing is I'm saying that means 3 times 4 plus, and then this means 3 times 2. Okay? And if you look at it, that's 12, and that's 6, and it's true. Okay? So that is proof that the distributive law works. You will not be doing the algebra now, but the reason you do it is for algebra. So if you had, for example, 6 times by a plus, let's make it 3, okay? Inside the bracket, we've got unlike terms. A plus 3, you cannot add them up and get something, but you can use the distributive law. So I can go 6 times a, which is 6a, and you don't need to worry about it if your algebra is terrible, because we'll go through it later. And I can go 6 times 3, which is 18, which is true and which is useful. At the moment, you're just unpacking like a kit of tools, and you're learning the tools, and you can't see why it's useful, but take my word for it, it is extremely useful. So the distributive law exists because of that, okay? If you had, for example, so your question that you would get in the next test, if you were asked for the distributive law, they would say to you, for example, use the distributive law to calculate, and let's make this 6 minus 3 plus 2. Now that is a much, much harder question, okay? The real answer, if you didn't use the distributive law, would be minus 3, and inside the bracket you'd say 6 minus 3, which is 3, plus 2, which is 5, and the real answer is definitely negative 15. Do you agree? But you're going to use the distributive law. The distributive law means that you have to multiply this by this one, and then multiply it by this one, and then multiply it by that one, right? So this is going to be minus 18. A negative times a negative is a positive 9. And a negative 3, that negative belongs to the 3. You remember that? Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So if I work this out, I've got negative 27 plus 9, and that's going to be negative 15. Same answer, right? That's the distributive law. So when we get to algebra, it's very, very useful indeed. Please note, don't go mad. This is for addition and subtraction. So remember that multiplication and division are always different. So if I had, for example, 3 times 6 times 5, this means 3 times 6 times 5. You're not suddenly multiplying by both of them, okay? If you worked in the bracket first, you'd get 30, and you'd say 3 times 30, which is 90. So you don't use the distributive law for multiplication. It is a law only for addition and subtraction. Is that okay? Okay, please write that down.